Hi everyone. I hope you are all keeping safe and well. I know this virus is being a bit naughty now and people have to stay away from each other. But hopefully you're all with your loved ones. But if not, some love from me to you and a big hug. So I'm about to do chapter 6 of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. And this one's called Pig and Pepper. So all get comfortable now because we're about to join in with the next chapter of the adventure. So settle down, boys and girls. For a minute or two she stood looking at the house and wondering what to do next, when suddenly a footman in a livery came running out of the wood. She considered him to be a footman because he was in livery? Otherwise, judging by his face only, she would have called him a fish, and rapped loudly at the door with his knuckles. It was opened by another footman in livery, with a round face and large eyes like a frog, and both footmen. That bad. There we go. Alice noticed had powdered hair that curled all over their heads. She felt very curious to know what it was all about, and she crept a little way out of the wood to listen. The fish footman began by producing from under his arm a great letter, nearly as large as himself, and this he handed over to the other, saying in a solemn tone, "For the Duchess, an invitation from the Queen to play croquet." The frog footman repeated, in the same sullen tone, only changing the order of the words a little, "From the Queen, an invitation for the Duchess to play croquet." They both bowed low, and their curls got entangled together. Oh, get off! Alice laughed so much at this that she had to run back into the wood for fear of their hearing her, and when she next peeped out, the fish footmen were gone, and the other was sitting on the ground near the door, staring stupidly in the sky. Alice went timidly up to the door and knocked. "There's no use in knocking," said the footman, "and that for two reasons. First, because I'm on the same side of the door as you are, and secondly, because they're making so much noise inside. No one could possibly hear you." And certainly there was a most extraordinary noise going on within, a constant howling and sneezing, and every now and then a great crash, as if a dish or a kettle had been broken to pieces. "Please then," said Alice, "how am I to get in?" "There might be some sense in your knocking," the footman went on, without attending to her. "If we had the door between us, for instance, if you were inside, you might knock, and I could let you out, you know." He was looking up into the sky all the time he was speaking, and this Alice thought decidedly uncivil. "But perhaps he can't help it," thought Alice to herself. "His eyes are so very nearly at the top of his head. But at any rate, he might answer the question, 'How am I to get in?'" she repeated aloud. I shall sit here," the footman remarked, "till tomorrow." At this moment the door of the house opened, and a large plate came skimming out straight past the footman's head. It just grazed his nose and broke to pieces against one of the trees behind him. "Or next day, maybe," the footman continued in the same tone, exactly as if nothing had happened. "How am I supposed to get in?" Alice asked again in a louder tone. "Are you to get in at all?" said the footman. "That's the first question, you know." It was, no doubt, only Alice did not like to be told so. "It's really dreadful," she muttered to herself. The way all the creatures argue. It's enough to drive anyone crazy. The footman seemed to consider this a good opportunity for repeating his remark with variations. I shall sit here, he said, on and off, for days and days. But what am I to do? Said Alice. Anything you like, said the footman, and began whistling. Oh, there's no use in talking to him, said Alice desperately. He's perfectly idiotic. She opened the door and went in. The door led right into a large kitchen, which was full of smoke from one end to the other. The Duchess was sitting on a three-legged stool in the middle and nursing a baby. The cook was leaning over the fire, stirring a large cauldron which seemed to be full of soup. Just that. So light inside in my house. Any better? There certainly was too much pepper in that soup, Alice said to herself, as well as she could for sneezing. There was certainly too much of it in the air. Even the Duchess sneezed occasionally, and the baby was sneezing and howling, alternately without a moment's pause. The only things in the kitchen that did not sneeze were the cook and a large cat that was sitting on the earth and grinning from ear to ear. Please, would you tell me, said Alice a little timidly, for she was not quite sure whether it was good manners for her to speak first, why your cat grins like that? It's a Cheshire cat, said the Duchess, and that is why. Pig! She said the last word with such a sudden violence that Alice quite jumped, but she saw in another moment that it was addressed to the baby, and not to her, so she took courage and went on again. I didn't know that Cheshire cats always grinned. In fact, I didn't know cats could grin. They all can, said the Duchess. And most of them do. I don't know of any that do that, Alice said very politely, feeling quite pleased to have got into a conversation. You don't know much, said the Duchess, and that's a fact. Alice did not like the tone of this remark, and thought it would be as well as to introduce some other subject of conversation. While she was trying to fix on one, the cook took the cauldron of soup off the fire and at once set to work throwing everything within her reach at the fire, at the Duchess, and the baby. The fire irons came first, then followed a shower of saucepans, plates and dishes. The Duchess took no notice of them, even when they hit her, and the baby was howling so much already that it was quite impossible to say whether the blows hurt it or not. Oh, please mind what you're doing, cried Alice, jumping up and down in an agony of terror. Oh, there goes his precious nose, as an unusually large saucepan flew close by it and very nearly carried it off. If everyone minded their own business, the Duchess said in a hoarse growl, the world would go on a deal faster than it does. Which would not be an advantage, said Alice, who felt very glad to get an opportunity of showing off a little of her knowledge. Just think what work it would make with the day and night. You see, the earth takes 24 hours to turn on its axis. Talking of axes, said the Duchess, chop off her head. Alice glanced rather anxiously at the cook to see if she meant to take the hint, but the cook was busily engaged in stirring the soup and did not seem to be listening, and she ventured to go on again. 24 hours, I think, or is it 12? Oh, don't bother me," said the Duchess. "I never could abide figures." And with that she began nursing her child again, singing a sort of lullaby to it as she did so, and giving it a violent shake at the end of every line. "Speak roughly, little boy, and beat him with sneezes. He only does it to annoy, but he knows how it teases." While the Duchess sang the second verse of the song, she kept tossing the baby violently up and down, and the poor little thing howled so that Alice could hardly hear the words. "I speak severely to my boy. I beat him when he sneezes, for he can fully enjoy the pepper when he pleases." "Here, you may nurse it for a bit if you like," the Duchess said to Alice, flinging the baby at her as she spoke. "I must go and get ready to play croquet with the Queen." And she hurried out of the room. The cook threw a frying pan after her as she went on, but it just missed her. Alice caught the baby with some difficulty, as it was a queer-shaped little creature, and held at its arms and legs in all directions. "Just like a starfish," thought Alice. Poor little thing was snorting like a steam engine when she caught it, and kept doubling itself up. Bear with me, computer. And straightening itself out again, so that altogether for the first minute or two it was much as she could do to hold it. As soon as she had made out the proper way of nursing it, which was to twist it up in a knot and keep tight hold of it right ear and left foot, as to prevent it undoing itself, she carried it out into the open air. "If I don't take this child away with me," thought Alice, "they're sure to kill it in a day or two. Wouldn't it be murder to leave it behind?" She said the last words out loud, and the little thing grunted in reply. It had left off a sneeze by this time. "Don't grunt," said Alice. "This is not at all a proper way of addressing yourself." The baby grunted again, and Alice looked very anxiously into its face to see what the matter with it. There could be no doubt that it had a very turn-up nose with much more like a snout than a real nose. Also, its eyes were getting extremely small for a baby. Altogether, Alice did not like the look of the thing at all, but perhaps it was only sobbing, she thought, and looked into its eyes again to see if there were any tears. No, there were no tears. "If you're going to turn into a pig, my dear," said Alice seriously, "I'll have nothing more to do with you. Mind now." The poor little thing sobbed again, or grunted, it was impossible to say which. And they went on for some while in silence. Alice was just beginning to think to herself, "Now, what am I to do with this creature when I get it home?" when it grunted again so violently that she looked down into its face in some alarm. This time there could be no mistake about it. It was neither more nor less than a pig, and she felt like it would be quite absurd for her to carry it any further. So she set the little creature down, and felt relieved to see it trot quietly away into the wood. "It had grown up," she said to herself. "It would have made a dreadfully ugly child, but it makes me rather a handsome pig, I think." And she began thinking over the other children she knew, who might do very well as pigs, and just saying to herself, if only one knew the right way to change them, when she was a little startled by seeing the Cheshire Cat sitting on a bough of a tree a few yards off. The cat only grinned when he saw Alice. It looked good-natured, she thought. Still, it had very long claws and a great many teeth, so she felt that it ought to be treated with respect. "Cheshire Puss," she began, rather timidly, as if she did not know at all whether it would like the name, however. It only grinned a little wider. "Come," thought Alice. Right, okay, that's the end of my battery life of my computer, but I will put the rest on tomorrow. So sleep tight, boys and girls. Love to all. Night night.